On March 8, 2014, the MH370 flight of the Malaysian Airlines, on board of which there were 239 people, suddenly disappeared from the radars. For many years, researchers have combed the depths of the ocean and carefully studied each evidence, desperately trying to reveal the truth about the mysterious disappearance. The searches of the Boeing 370 flight have even become the largest in the history of aviation, but unfortunately, they did not bring any results. People have proposed a lot of theories about the disappearance of the MH370, but only one of them is true: hijacking, mechanical failure, meteorite, or pilot. Various data on this flight simply do not coincide. This part of the plane is called the flaperon, and it was found on the island of Réunion in the Indian Ocean. Expertise has shown that this part belongs to the MH370, but the plane disappeared in a completely different place. Then how could it be here? Despite the fact that more than 10 years later the location of the MH370 is still unknown, a lot of new discoveries and advanced theories have been made recently. So what really happened to the Malaysian Flight 370? Get ready for the most interesting dive into the mystery of the MH370. The mysterious story of the MH370 begins here. It was a night flight to Kuala Lumpur, Beijing. The plane was supposed to take off at midnight and arrive in Beijing at dawn. An ordinary, nothing special flight. 227 passengers and 12 crew members. At this time, the plane takes off. The night was clear, everything was calm. The plane is gaining altitude. It flies over the South China Sea. Immediately after 1 o'clock at night, the situation becomes very strange. The plane has almost left the Malaysian airspace. The flight will be carried out by dispatchers in Vietnam. The plane is approaching the borders of the Malaysian airspace, and the captain of the flight, Zahari Amachak, wishes good night to the Malaysian dispatchers. And after 90 seconds, the plane's mark suddenly darkens. It disappears from the radars. And since then, everything is covered in mystery. The Vietnamese dispatchers try to contact the plane, but do not receive a response from the crew. After that, the operators from Kashmir and Malaysia tried all available methods of communication with the board. They used the address for the aviation communication system, radio exchange, and calls from a satellite phone. For some reason, the dispatchers were reassured by the Malaysian Airlines representatives, who reported that the flight was on the route. Because of this, an emergency situation was announced only 6.5 hours after the plane's loss. Later, the Malaysian Airlines admitted that they made a statement based on the flight plan, not on the actual observation aboard. By that time, the plane was to land in Beijing. Efforts to find it were primarily concentrated in the South China Sea, between Malaysia and Vietnam. These were the international actions of 34 ships and 28 planes from 7 different countries. But MH370 was not there. Then the research territory spread to the Malacca Strait, along the western coast of the Malacca Peninsula. At the same time, water was examined both to the east from Malaysia in the Siamese Gulf and in the Malacca Strait along the western coast of Malaysia. Numerous observations were made of possible debris. However, no debris of the MH370 were found. Only a mysterious oil stain was found on the Vietnamese coast. However, tests for the presence of aviation fuel gave a negative result. After a while, the Ministry of Defense of Malaysia stated that in fact they detected Boeing using a military radar. The data said that at about 1:40 p.m., the plane made a turn and headed in the opposite direction, towards Malaysia, significantly deviating from the course. But how is this possible? After this statement, efforts were made in the southern part of the Indian Ocean, to the west from Australia, where thousands of kilometers of the ocean were explored. Researchers carried out surface, underwater, and hydrological sea bottom examinations. However, nothing significant was found. So far in 2015, the MH370 did not come as a surprise. Many debris were suddenly dumped on the coast of Africa and tiny islands in the Indian Ocean. The first clear fragments of MH370 debris were found in June 2015 by search engines scouring the Indian Ocean. The searchers confirmed that 3 fragments definitely belong to the plane that disappeared in 2014. The flaps found in Tanzania in June 2015, a fragment of the wing of the plane found in Mauritius, and a flap found on the island of Réunion, which we talked about at the beginning of the issue. During the period from 2015 to 2016, other fragments were also found, which, as it was believed, most likely belonged to MH370. They include the interior panel of the cabin in Madagascar, the hood of the engine in South Africa, the interior panel of the main cabin in Mauritius, as well as a horizontal stabilizer and a deflector for the flaps on the beaches of Mozambique. Although it was confirmed that some parts belonged to the MH370 flight, the debris of the plane has not yet been found. The fact is that the found debris was not enough to track where the plane fell. So since then, attention has switched to why and how it disappeared. The debris found by a fisherman from Madagascar indicates that the one who controlled the plane deliberately tried to destroy it and sink it together with all the passengers on board. The chute on the shore. The door of the landing gear was pierced from the inside by the plane's engines, crumbling when hit. This makes it very likely that the landing gear was released at the time of the plane's fall into the Indian Ocean. Most likely, the airliner suffered a crash on purpose. The fact that the damage was found from the inside to the outside makes it possible to conclude that the landing gear pushed out strongly when hit, which in turn confirms the conclusion that an active pilot was on board, and what is even more terrible, the plane spent its last hours at dawn with the only living person on board. The level of damage with cracks on all sides and the extreme force of penetration through the debris makes it possible to conclude that the flight ended in a high-speed peaking mode, intended to ensure the crash of the plane into as many parts as possible. In other words, the MH370 crash was anything but a soft landing in the ocean. The fact is that the early high-speed impact intended to break the plane into several parts, and the landing gear released intended to drown the plane as quickly as possible clearly demonstrates an intention to hide the evidence of the crash. Usually, pilots do not release the landing gear if they need to make an emergency landing on the water. This means that something was clearly not an emergency landing that went wrong. The board was equipped with terminals that each hour transmitted technical information about the engine operation to the ground services through the satellites of Inmarsat, thanks to which it was possible to calculate the flight trajectory. At the decision of the turn, the plane could either go north towards India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, China, and Kazakhstan, or to the south, to the Indian Ocean. Since all the above countries stated that the board did not enter the airspace, Inmarsat specialists concluded about the crash of the plane in the Indian Ocean when Boeing ran out of fuel. Malaysia Airlines stated that the pilot, Captain Zagari Ahmad Shah, deliberately changed course and drowned the board in the ocean, killing 239 people. A few years later, the FBI, which took over Zagari's home aviation simulator, suddenly stated that the ship's commander was conducting training flights on a similar course, thereby, it seems, confirming this theory. It should be noted that in the history of aviation, there were similar cases. But this is the first case when the killing of passengers lasted 6 hours, which cannot help but make us think, what if it was not Zagari? There is a theory that claims that a catastrophic event forced the pilots to turn the plane back towards the Malaysian peninsula in the hope of landing at the nearest airport. The plane made a sudden 180-degree turn, but then crashed due to a fire in the crew's cabin. Of course, all this is just a theory and assumption. And including this video, you probably wanted to see more evidence and facts. Unfortunately, we are not yet able to answer the question of what really happened with the Malaysian Flight 370, but we can try to answer the question of where MH370 is. Now you will find out what kind of scientific method can finally detect MH370, why British scientists plan to conduct explosions on the seabed, why the 6-second signal can become the key in the case of a missing plane, who is still looking for the missing flight MH370, and why this secret is so difficult to solve. As you think, does the sound of a falling tree in the forest make a sound if there is no one nearby who could hear it? In the event of a catastrophic crash or explosion in the ocean, for example, a plane crash, there is a report pressure signal, better known as a sound wave, and often there is an underwater microphone nearby, known as a hydrophone, to catch the signature. If you find the person who heard where the tree fell, then you can accurately determine where the plane is now. Official investigations have concluded that MH370 must have suffered a crash near the 7th arc, with the help of a plane and a satellite Inmarsat. Scientists processed more than 100 hours of data obtained using hydrophones, and then analyzed 10 historical air crashes and 1 disappearance of a submarine. They came to the conclusion that strong waves from the ocean, such as the MH370 flight, which would be equivalent to a small earthquake, create distinct acoustic signatures, which spread through the water and are registered by hydrophones installed all over the world. And during what was likely the final stage of the MH370 path in the southern part of the Indian Ocean, only one relatively weak 6-second signal was identified, which corresponded to both the time and the potential area of the crash. British scientists continued to conduct a series of controlled underwater explosions or shelling from air weapons along the 7th arc to check whether they could determine a more accurate location of MH370. Such exercises were carried out earlier during the search and rescue operation of the Airlines submarine, which disappeared off the coast of Argentina in 2017. If something is established that this 6-second signal is somehow connected with MH370, it can become key in the case of the missing plane. Meanwhile, some scientists believe that they already know where the plane is. In their opinion, the exact location of MH370 is a very deep pit, about 6,000 meters deep, about 1,500 kilometers west of Perth and along the Delgado Peninsula. But how could independent scientists so accurately determine the location of the plane if the years of official searches did not give any results? Radio amateurs constantly send test signals and record the data of these signals, which has been happening for decades. It was these data that allowed scientists to find the plane. When a plane flies through a radio signal, it violates the frequency, and therefore the violation can be traced to the presence of the plane. Scientists managed to determine the location of the plane and track its path. The results of their investigation exactly coincide with satellite data of Inmarsat, as well as oceanography data. The crash site of MH370, determined by this technology, is within a circle with a radius of 30 kilometers with a center in the point with the given coordinates. This area is located 1,560 kilometers west of Perth, Australia. Scientists are sure that only one more search and investigation of the incident and the search for MH370 have been stopped. Not a single body has ever been found and no fragments, except those 20, which do not add clarity to the situation. This means that neither relatives of the passengers nor the rest of the world know the exact causes of the crash. The only hope to find the ultimate truth is to find more fragments of the MH370 flight. We hope that someday the researchers will reveal the main mystery in the history of aviation about the most amazing and mysterious places on Earth, as well as the incredible universe that surrounds us.